My name is Patricia Montgomery, and at 68 years old, I never expected to be relegated to the kitchen at my only son Adam's wedding. I had my reservations about Stephanie from the beginning, but I kept them to myself for Adam's sake. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened that day. How my own flesh and blood stood by while I was humiliated. When Stephanie sneered those words at me, something snapped. The phone call I made changed everything, not just for them but for me too. Before I dive into this painful story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. Trust me, what happened next will shock you. I built Montgomery Healthcare Systems from nothing but a dream and determination back in 1985. Back then, female entrepreneurs in the tech sector were rare, especially those developing specialized software for hospital administration. I remember working 18-hour days, coding at my kitchen table, while my husband Robert handled the business development side. We were quite the team, Robert and I. He believed in me when nobody else did. We mortgaged our modest home in Boston to fund the initial development, and I still remember the thrill when we landed our first contract with Massachusetts General. That was the beginning of something much bigger than we ever imagined. Robert died suddenly from a heart attack 10 years ago. Adam was just finishing college then. The loss devastated us both, but it also brought us closer. Adam was 22, just starting to find his footing in the world, and suddenly he was the only man in my life. I poured everything into being both mother and father to him, even though he was technically an adult. Adam was always brilliant with numbers. He studied finance at Boston University and graduated summa cum laude. I was so proud watching him walk across that stage in his cap and gown. Robert would have been bursting with pride too. When Adam mentioned his interest in investment banking, I made a few calls to former clients who owed me favors. Not to get him a job outright, I wanted him to earn his position, but to secure interviews where his talents could shine. He did the rest himself, landing a prestigious position at Harrington Financial. We had dinner every Sunday without fail, even as his career took off. He would tell me about his clients, his projects, his ambitions. I cherished those moments, watching my son become the successful man his father and I had raised him to be. Then came Stephanie Blake. Adam brought her to our Sunday dinner 6 months after they started dating. She was beautiful, I'll give her that, tall, slender, with perfect blonde hair and the kind of polished appearance that comes from spending considerable time and money on oneself. She worked in public relations for Ellison luxury brands, managing their designer accounts and fashion events. Stephanie was polite enough that first evening, complimenting my home and asking appropriate questions about my business. But there was something distant in her eyes, an appraising look that made me feel like I was being assessed rather than met. I ignored my instincts, telling myself I was being overprotective. 3 months later, Adam announced they were engaged. 6 months seemed awfully quick to make such a commitment, but Adam was 32 and assured me he had never been more certain about anything. I hugged him, told him I was happy if he was happy, and offered to help however I could with the wedding. What I didn't say was that I had noticed how Stephanie subtly steered Adam away from our traditions. Sunday dinners became monthly, then sporadic. When they did come, Stephanie dominated the conversation with stories about celebrities she worked with or charity galas they attended. Adam seemed captivated, laughing at all her jokes, agreeing with all her opinions. Despite my reservations, I wanted to support their marriage. When they started discussing wedding plans, I offered to pay for everything. I had the means, my company had grown tremendously over the years, and I wanted to give my only child the wedding of his dreams. I wrote a check for $150,000 without hesitation, telling them to create whatever celebration would make them happiest. Looking back, I wonder if that generosity was my first mistake. The class distinction between our families became apparent during the initial planning meetings. Stephanie's parents, Miranda and George Blake, owned a small accounting firm in Sudbury. They were comfortable but clearly intimidated by the scale of the wedding their daughter wanted, and by me, though I tried to put them at ease. I suggested hosting a dinner for both families to get better acquainted. I prepared Robert's famous lasagna recipe, and made sure everything was welcoming but not ostentatious. The evening was pleasant on the surface, but I noticed how Miranda flinched when I mentioned my recent donation to the Boston Symphony Orchestra. and how George became overly interested in his wine glass whenever business came up. Stephanie began taking control of every wedding detail almost immediately. I had hoped we might bond during the planning process. I never had a daughter, and part of me looked forward to sharing in these traditional mother-daughter activities. Instead, I found myself increasingly sidelined. We already chose the venue, Stephanie informed me when I asked about helping with location scouting. The flowers are taken care of, she said when I mentioned a wonderful florist I knew. The menu has been finalized, she replied when I suggested including a dish Adam had loved since childhood. I was particularly hurt when I learned that Stephanie had gone dress shopping with Miranda and her bridesmaids without even telling me. I only found out afterward, when Adam mentioned offhandedly how beautiful she looked in the gown they had selected. I would have loved to be there, I said to Adam later, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. Mom, it was just a quick thing, he replied, not meeting my eyes. Stephanie said they only had that afternoon free because of everyone's schedules. One evening, I arrived early to a planning meeting at Stephanie and Adam's condo. As I approached their door, I overheard Stephanie and her mother talking inside. She just doesn't understand how things are done, Miranda was saying. All that old money makes people think they can control everything. Well, her checkbook is useful, Stephanie replied with a laugh that made my stomach tighten. But don't worry, this is our wedding, not hers. I almost turned around and left, but instead I took a deep breath, waited a few minutes, then rang the doorbell as if I'd just arrived. They greeted me with smiles that now seemed practiced and hollow. That night, I tried to discuss my concerns with Adam over coffee after Miranda and Stephanie left to look at bridesmaid dresses. Honey, I feel like I'm being pushed out of the wedding planning, I began carefully. I'd really like to be more involved. Adam sighed, running a hand through his hair. A gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. Mom, you're overreacting. Stephanie has a specific vision, and she's really good at organizing these things. Her job is literally managing high-profile events. This isn't just any event, Adam. It's your wedding. Our family should have some input too. His expression hardened slightly. The problem is you're trying to control everything just like you do with your company. Stephanie feels pressured by your expectations. My expectations? I echoed, genuinely confused. Yes. Your money, your success, your way of doing things. It's intimidating for her. I sat back, stunned. Somehow, my desire to participate had been twisted into something controlling and negative. Despite everything in me wanting to protest, I nodded and promised to step back. I told myself it was more important to maintain peace than to fight for inclusion. Another mistake as it turned out. The bridal shower was organized by Stephanie's maid of honor, a fellow PR executive named Brittany who seemed to view me as competition rather than family. I received an invitation 2 weeks after everyone else, a fact I discovered only when Miranda mentioned offhandedly that the final headcount was due yesterday. The event was held at an upscale restaurant in Back Bay. When I arrived, the long table was already full of chatting women, with a single empty seat at the far end, distance from Stephanie who sat in the center surrounded by her friends. The gifts were open with much fanfare. Expensive lingerie, crystal stemware, designer kitchen gadgets. My gift, a family heirloom necklace that had belonged to my grandmother, was acknowledged with a brief thank you, and quickly set aside for the next wrapped package. The rehearsal dinner should have been my moment as mother of the groom, traditionally hosted by the groom's family. Instead, Stephanie's parents insisted on handling it themselves, though I suspected this was Stephanie's idea rather than theirs. When I offered to at least split the cost, George looked relieved, but Miranda quickly interjected. We have it under control, Patricia. I arrived at the upscale steakhouse to find myself seated at a table with distant cousins of the Blakes, while Adam, Stephanie, and both her parents occupied the center table with the wedding party. Throughout the evening, I watched as Adam leaned close to Stephanie, whispering in her ear and laughing, while occasionally glancing my way with what seemed like guilt before quickly looking away. Stephanie's bridesmaids were all cut from the same cloth, beautiful, polished women who worked in fashion, media, or public relations. During the cocktail hour, I overheard 2 of them near the ladies' room. That's his mother? In that outfit? One whispered. I know, right? Stephanie says she dresses like she's stuck in the 90s, replied the other with a giggle. I looked down at my navy blue dress with its modest neckline and pearl buttons. It was elegant and appropriate, selected from a high-end boutique in Beacon Hill. Suddenly I felt dowdy and outdated, exactly as they intended. The day before the wedding, I made one last attempt to connect with Stephanie. I called and asked if we might have tea together, just the two of us. "I'm really quite busy today with last-minute details," she replied, her voice cool. "Just half an hour," I pressed gently. "I have something special I'd like to discuss with you before tomorrow." She relented, agreeing to meet me at a cafe near her apartment. When I arrived, she was already there, typing rapidly on her phone, her expression impatient. "Thank you for making time," I began after ordering our tea. "I wanted to speak with you privately about tomorrow." "Everything has been arranged perfectly," she cut in before I could continue. "The coordinator has all the details, so you don't need to worry about anything." "That's not why I wanted to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice warm. "I wanted to tell you how happy I am that Adam found someone he loves so deeply, and to say that I'm looking forward to welcoming you into our family officially." The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but I was determined to make one last effort for Adam's sake. Stephanie's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained calculating. "That's very kind of you, Patricia. I also wanted to tell you about a wedding gift I've been arranging," I continued. "Something for both of you, actually." This caught her interest. "Oh." Before I could elaborate, my phone rang. It was Jessica, my executive assistant. "I'm sorry, I need to take this," I told Stephanie, then answered. "Jessica, what's the update on the Harrington contract?" "The legal team just finished the final review," Jessica reported. "Everything looks good for the $30 million implementation. We just need your signature after the wedding, and Adam's firm will handle the financial software upgrade for all 17 hospitals in our network." "Wonderful news," I replied, conscious of Stephanie's suddenly intense attention. "Let's plan to finalize it on Monday." I ended the call and turned back to Stephanie, who was now looking at me with new interest. "Was that about work?" she asked casually. "Yes, just finalizing a major contract. Actually, it relates to what I wanted to discuss with you. I've been working on a business arrangement with Adam's firm. It would be a significant boost for his career." I deliberately kept the details vague, wanting to surprise them both after the wedding. For the first time since I'd met her, Stephanie's smile reached her eyes. "That sounds wonderful. Adam will be thrilled." We parted on seemingly better terms, and I allowed myself a small hope that perhaps things would improve after the wedding. That evening, I called Jessica again to confirm the details of the contract. "Everything is ready," she assured me. "This will be a wonderful surprise for Adam." "Are you sure about mixing family and business, though?" I hesitated. Normally I wouldn't, but Adam has proven himself at Harrington. This contract is legitimate. His team submitted the best proposal. The fact that it helps my son's career is just a happy coincidence. "If you're sure," Jessica said, her voice carrying a note of caution that I chose to ignore. "I am. Let's proceed as planned." That night, I laid out my mother-of-the-groom outfit, an elegant silver gray dress and jacket I had custom-made for the occasion, and went to sleep dreaming of a reconciliation with my son and his new wife, facilitated by my generous wedding gift of a business connection that would advance Adam's career significantly. How wrong I was. I woke early on the day of the wedding, excitement and anxiety battling in my stomach. The ceremony wasn't until 4 in the afternoon, but I wanted to arrive at the venue early to help with any last-minute preparations. I selected my jewelry carefully. Robert's mother's pearls and the diamond earrings my husband had given me on our 25th anniversary. I wanted to carry pieces of our family history with me as our family expanded to include Stephanie. The ceremony and reception were both being held at the Whittier Historical Estate, a magnificent 19th-century mansion with sprawling gardens just outside Boston. When I arrived at 11, the place was already buzzing with activity. Florists arranged elaborate centerpieces, catering staff prepared the kitchen, and the wedding planner, a brisk woman named Candace, directed everyone with military precision. "Good morning," I greeted her warmly. "I'm Patricia Montgomery, Adam's mother. Is there anything I can help with?" Candace consulted her tablet, frowning slightly. "Oh, Mrs. Montgomery. Thank you for the offer, but Mrs. Blake has everything under control. Your assistance won't be necessary. I see. I tried not to let my disappointment show. Well, where are the bride and bridesmaids getting ready? I thought I might check in with them. They're in the East Wing suite, but they requested no visitors, she replied, not meeting my eyes. Stephanie wants to maintain a calm environment before the ceremony. Effectively dismissed, I wandered through the venue, admiring the decorations while feeling increasingly out of place. Around one, I noticed a photographer directing various groupings of the Blake family for pre-ceremony photos near the garden gazebo. Adam was there too, handsome in his tuxedo, arm around his soon-to-be mother-in-law. Excuse me, I approached the photographer during a break. I'm the groom's mother. Will we be doing photos with the Montgomery side soon? The photographer looked confused, checking his shot list. I don't have any specific groupings with. I'm sorry, what was your name again? Patricia Montgomery. The groom's mother. I repeated, my voice tight. Let me check with Stephanie, he said, walking away quickly. He returned a few minutes later, his expression uncomfortably apologetic. Mrs. Blake says we'll just catch some candidates of you during the reception. We're running behind schedule. I nodded and walked away before he could see the hurt in my eyes. I found a quiet corner of the garden to compose myself, reminding myself that today was about Adam's happiness, not my feelings. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I have to admit. The garden had been transformed with white roses and ivy, elegant chairs lined up facing an arch entwined with flowers. But even here I found myself marginalized. When I approached the usher to be seated, he consulted his list and directed me to a seat in the back row, far from where the Blake family sat prominently in the front. There must be a mistake, I said. I'm the mother of the groom. I'm just following the seating chart, ma'am, he replied uncomfortably. Rather than cause a scene, I took the assigned seat, watching from a distance as my only son pledged his life to a woman who seemed determined to erase me from his life. When they were pronounced husband and wife, I clapped and smiled, blinking back tears that weren't entirely from joy. After the ceremony, I made my way toward the newlyweds, eager to congratulate them properly. Before I could reach them, one of the bridesmaids, Brittany the maid of honor, stepped into my path. They'll be taking photos for the next hour, she informed me. You can congratulate them at the reception. But I'm his mother, I protested. And they have a strict timeline to keep, she replied firmly. The photographer is only booked until 9. Dismissed again, I made my way to the reception hall, where guests were beginning to arrive for the cocktail hour before dinner. I searched for the seating chart, running my finger down the alphabetical list of names. Montgomery. My name wasn't listed on any of the tables. Surely there was a mistake. I approached the reception coordinator, a young man with a clipboard who was directing waitstaff. Excuse me, I can't seem to find my table assignment.
I'm Patricia Montgomery.
He scrolled through his tablet, frowning. Let me see. Montgomery. Oh. His expression shifted to one of embarrassment. Let me check with Mrs. Blake. There might have been a last-minute change. He hurried away, returning several minutes later with Candace, the wedding planner, whose professional smile didn't reach her eyes. Mrs. Montgomery, there was a bit of a space issue with the table arrangements. We've set up a small table near the kitchen entrance for you and a few other guests. A table near the kitchen? I repeated, sure I had misheard. But I'm the mother of the groom. Candace had the grace to look uncomfortable. I understand, but the final seating arrangement was approved by the bride and groom. If you'd like to discuss it with them. I was speechless. My son had approved this? Had known his own mother would be seated by the kitchen, away from family and friends like an afterthought? I see, was all I could manage to say. I made my way to the indicated table, a small round one partially hidden behind a decorative screen, directly beside the swinging doors that led to the kitchen. 2 distant Blake relatives were already seated there, looking equally displeased with their placement. I took a deep breath, determined not to let this ruin the evening. I would speak with Adam and Stephanie directly. Surely there had been some misunderstanding. As the reception progressed into dinner service, I watched as Adam and Stephanie made their entrance as husband and wife, danced their first dance and cut the cake, all without acknowledging my presence. The head table where they sat with Stephanie's parents and the wedding party was positioned on a slight platform at the front of the room, giving them a view of all the guests. All except those of us hidden near the kitchen. During a lull between courses, I made my way to their table, pasting on my warmest smile. "The ceremony was beautiful," I said, approaching Adam first and kissing his cheek. "Congratulations to you both." Adam had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Thanks, Mom. Are you enjoying yourself?" "The food is lovely," I replied diplomatically, though I was hoping we might have a moment together as family. Stephanie turned from her conversation with her father, her smile practiced. "Patricia, I'm glad you're having a good time. Actually, I wanted to ask about the seating arrangements," I said, keeping my voice low. "There seems to have been some confusion. I'm seated by the kitchen, quite far from you both." Several guests at nearby tables glanced our way, clearly listening. Stephanie's smile never wavered. "Oh, there wasn't room at the family tables. We had to make some last-minute adjustments because of the final count." "I see." I looked at Adam, waiting for him to intervene, to express surprise, to offer a solution. He said nothing, just took a sip of champagne, his eyes averted. "Well, perhaps after dinner we could spend some time together," I suggested. "Of course," Stephanie said smoothly. "We'll be making rounds to all the tables." I nodded and turned to go back to my seat, feeling the eyes of dozens of guests on my back. As I walked away, I overheard a bridesmaid whisper, "Isn't that his mother? Why is she sitting way back there?" When I returned to my table, the other two guests had abandoned it, presumably finding friends at other tables to join. I sat alone, picking at my salmon as waitstaff rushed past, the kitchen doors swinging open and closed beside me. "Can you believe they put the groom's mother here?" I overheard one server say to another as they grabbed trays of desserts. "I heard the bride can't stand her," replied the other. "Something about the mother being too controlling. Still, it's cold. If my fiancé did that to my mother, I'd call off the wedding." I stared down at my plate, my appetite gone, humiliation burning in my chest. This was deliberate. Not an oversight, not a mistake, but a calculated insult designed to put me in my place. I was considering whether to simply leave when Stephanie approached my table, her mother Miranda in tow. Both women wore identical smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Patricia, I just wanted to check that everything is to your liking," Stephanie said, her voice carrying just enough for nearby tables to hear. "The food is excellent," I replied evenly, though the company is somewhat lacking at this table. Miranda's smile tightened. "Well, we had to be careful about the seating charts. Some people don't mix well with others." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Absolutely," Stephanie said with a light laugh. "Social dynamics are so important at events like these." I looked directly at her. "And what social dynamic were you aiming for by seating your new mother-in-law alone by the kitchen?" Stephanie's facade cracked slightly, her eyes narrowing. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Let me be clear. This is my wedding. My day. Not everything revolves around Adam's family. Our family," I corrected quietly. "We're connected now, like it or not." Something ugly flashed in Stephanie's eyes. She straightened, looking down at me with undisguised contempt. "The help eats in the kitchen," she sneered, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "You should be grateful you're not washing dishes." The room seemed to go silent around us. Miranda looked startled, as if even she hadn't expected such open hostility. A few gasps came from neighboring tables. And in that moment something crystallized within me, a clarity of purpose, a recognition of exactly who Stephanie was and what she thought of me despite all I had given. I smiled. A real smile, not the forced one I'd been wearing all day. I reached for my purse and took out my phone, my movements deliberate and unhurried. "What are you doing?" Stephanie demanded, suddenly uncertain. "Making a call," I replied calmly, scrolling through my contacts until I found Jessica's number. I pressed dial, holding Stephanie's gaze as the phone rang. From the corner of my eye, I saw Adam notice our interaction and start making his way toward us, his expression concerned. Jessica answered on the second ring. "Patricia? Is everything okay?" I thought you'd be celebrating at the reception. Jessica, I need you to cancel the $30 million contract with Harrington Financial, I said clearly, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet around our table. Effective immediately. What? Jessica sounded shocked. But we've been working on this for months. The paperwork is ready to sign on Monday. I'm aware, but circumstances have changed. Please notify their CEO tonight and begin looking for another firm to handle our implementation. Adam reached our table just in time to hear my instructions. His face went pale as he realized what was happening. Mom, he began, his voice strangled. What are you doing? I held up one finger, still focused on my call. Yes, Jessica. I understand it will delay the project, but I'm no longer comfortable with the arrangement. Thank you. I ended the call and placed my phone carefully back in my purse, looking up to find Adam staring at me in horror, while Stephanie looked confused. What contract? She demanded, looking between us. Adam, what is she talking about? The $30 million software implementation contract I was planning to sign with Adam's division on Monday, I explained pleasantly. My wedding gift to you both. It would have established Adam as the youngest partner in the firm's history, according to his boss. Such a shame. Understanding dawned on Stephanie's face, followed quickly by panic. You can't do that. That's vindictive. No, I corrected her. Vindictive would be telling everyone here how you've treated me today. Vindictive would be making a scene. This is simply a business decision. I don't do business with people who don't respect me. I stood, smoothing my dress. Adam, Stephanie, congratulations again on your wedding. I think it's time for me to go. Adam grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Mom, you can't be serious. That contract is massive for my career. For our future. I looked into my son's eyes, Robert's eyes, and saw not the man I thought I'd raised, but a stranger who had allowed his mother to be humiliated. You made your choice today, Adam, I said softly. You chose to let your wife treat me like a servant at your wedding. Now I'm making mine. I gently removed his hand from my arm and walked out of the reception, head held high, leaving stunned silence in my wake. The moment I stepped outside the reception hall, my composure began to crack. I made it to my car before the tears came, hot and fast, blurring my vision as I fumbled with my keys. Not tears of sadness but of anger, at Stephanie for her cruelty, at myself for not seeing this coming, but mostly at Adam for his betrayal. My son, who I had raised alone after Robert died. My son, who I had supported through every triumph and failure. My son, who had stood by and watched as I was deliberately humiliated at his wedding. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering myself. My phone rang repeatedly, Adam calling, but I silenced it each time. Finally, I started the engine and drove home to my empty house, the one where Adam had grown up, filled with memories of happier times. Once home, I kicked off my uncomfortable heels and poured myself a generous glass of whiskey, Robert's favorite Macallan, and sat in our library surrounded by family photos. One in particular caught my eye. Adam at his college graduation, standing proudly between Robert and me, all of us beaming with joy and hope for the future. My phone rang again. Jessica this time, not Adam. Patricia, are you really sure about canceling the Harrington contract? She asked without preamble when I answered. I've notified their CEO as you asked, and he's practically having a meltdown. He's asking for an emergency meeting tomorrow. I'm absolutely certain, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. What happened today made me realize that mixing family and business would be a terrible mistake. Do you want to talk about it? Jessica had been with me for 15 years, more friend than employee at this point. Not tonight, I said. But I need you to begin reviewing the other proposals we received. I believe Wilson & Associates was our second choice. Yes, their bid was only slightly higher than Harrington's, and they have more experience with hospital networks. Perfect. Let's move forward with them instead. Set up a meeting for Monday afternoon. After ending the call, I sat in silence, sipping my whiskey and confronting the clarity that had come to me in that humiliating moment by the kitchen. For years, I had excused Adam's gradual pulling away as normal adult independence. I had tolerated Stephanie's subtle digs and exclusions, telling myself it was just wedding stress or her insecurity. But the truth was now unavoidable. They had deliberately orchestrated my exclusion and humiliation. The help eats in the kitchen. Those words kept echoing in my mind, along with the memory of Adam's face. Not shocked or appalled by his wife's behavior, but panicked only when he realized there would be consequences. My phone rang again, Adam for the 4th time. This time I answered. Mom. His voice was frantic. You need to reconsider. Do you have any idea what you've done? My boss just called me at my own wedding reception. Hello to you too, Adam, I replied calmly. Are you calling to apologize for how I was treated today? This isn't about that, he said dismissively. This is about a $30 million contract that would have made my career. Then we have nothing to discuss. I kept my voice even with effort. The contract was a gift, Adam. One I'm no longer comfortable giving to someone who treats me like an unwelcome stranger. Mom, be reasonable. Stephanie was just stressed. Wedding days are emotional. Yes, they are, I agreed. Which is why I'm hurt that on this emotional day, you allowed me to be seated alone by the kitchen, excluded from family photos, and publicly insulted by your new wife. There was a pause, then his voice lowered. Look, some of that was just miscommunication. But you've potentially ruined my career over a seating chart. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Adam. That's something your father and I tried to teach you. Actions have consequences. Choices matter. So undo it, he demanded. Call Jessica back and tell her it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision, one I made with complete clarity. I took a deep breath. Adam, I love you. I always will. But I won't be treated like this, not even by you. Stephanie's family is furious, he said, his voice turning cold. They think you've embarrassed us deliberately. Interesting perspective, I replied. I was unaware that being treated with basic courtesy was too much to ask. You know what? Keep your contract. We don't need your money or your help. We never did. His voice was hard now, angry. Clearly, I said softly.
Goodbye, Adam.
I ended the call and turned off my phone, knowing he might call back in anger or that Stephanie might try next. I needed space to process everything that had happened, to mourn what felt like the loss of my son all over again. The house felt emptier than ever that night. I walked through the hallways, touching photographs of our family through the years, wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I spoiled Adam? Had I been too controlling, as Stephanie suggested? Or had I simply failed to see that my son had grown into a man who would value status and money over loyalty and respect? Morning came after a mostly sleepless night. I turned my phone back on to find 17 missed calls and numerous text messages. Most from Adam, but some from numbers I didn't recognize, likely Stephanie or her family. I ignored them all and called Jessica instead. I need you to come to the house, I told her. We have work to do. Jessica arrived an hour later, laptop in hand, professional as always but with concern evident in her eyes. The Wilson contract? She asked as I let her in. Yes, but first I need to tell you exactly what happened yesterday. We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had taught Adam to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, where we had celebrated birthdays and graduations, where we had mourned Robert together. I told Jessica everything, from being excluded from photos to the fateful words that had triggered my decision. The help eats in the kitchen. I repeated, the words still stinging. That's what my new daughter-in-law thinks of me. Jessica's expression hardened. She said that to your face? After you paid for the entire wedding? And Adam said nothing. Did nothing. Just watched it happen. Jessica shook her head. Then you absolutely made the right call canceling that contract. Business partnerships require trust and mutual respect. This would have been a disaster waiting to happen. That's what I realized in that moment, I agreed. If they could treat me this way on their wedding day, with hundreds of witnesses, how would they behave once they had what they wanted from me? We spent the rest of the day reviewing the Wilson proposal and preparing for Monday's meeting. Work had always been my refuge, my purpose beyond motherhood. Now it seemed it might be all I had left. That evening there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Adam standing there, still in yesterday's clothes, looking haggard and desperate. We need to talk, he said without greeting. Not tonight, I replied, keeping my hand on the door. I'm not ready, and you're clearly exhausted and emotional. Mom, please. My boss is threatening to fire me. He thinks I deliberately misled him about our connection. That's between you and your employer, I said firmly. I'm sorry if there are professional consequences, but that doesn't change what happened. I'll fix it, he promised frantically. I'll make it up to you. Just please call this off. I studied my son's face, not seeing remorse for how I'd been treated, only panic over the impact to his career. When you're ready to genuinely apologize for yesterday, not just because you want something from me, we can talk. Until then, I think we both need space. I closed the door gently but firmly, leaning against it as I heard his footsteps reluctantly retreat. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, turning away my only child when he was asking for help. But I knew that giving in now would only teach him that I could be mistreated without consequences, that my dignity was less important than his convenience. That night, I wrote Adam a long email explaining exactly how I had felt throughout the wedding planning and especially on the day itself. I detailed each slight, each exclusion, each moment where he could have intervened but chose not to. I ended it with, I have always loved you unconditionally, and I always will. But love doesn't mean accepting disrespect or cruelty. When you're ready to talk about what really happened and why you allowed it, I'll be here. Until then, I think we both need time to reflect on the kind of relationship we want to have going forward. I sent it, then finally took a sleeping pill and fell into exhausted slumber, emotionally drained but certain I had done what was necessary, not just for my dignity but ultimately for Adam's character as well. Adam continued calling for several days, his messages gradually shifting from demanding to pleading, but I maintained my boundary. I would speak with him when he was ready to acknowledge what had happened, not before. In the meantime, I signed the contract with Wilson & Associates, threw myself into work, and began the painful process of adjusting to this new reality where my relationship with my only child was fundamentally altered. Diana, my closest friend since college, became my lifeline during those difficult weeks. She had attended the wedding and witnessed everything. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, she told me over dinner at her home a week after the wedding. When Stephanie made that help comment, I nearly marched over there myself. But then you handled it with such dignity. I was in awe. I didn't feel dignified, I admitted. I felt destroyed. But I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Do you think there's any chance for reconciliation? Diana asked gently. I sighed. I hope so eventually, but not until Adam understands what happened and makes amends. Real amends, not just because he wants something from me. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received a text from Adam asking if we could meet for coffee. Just him, no Stephanie. I agreed, suggesting a cafe in neutral territory, away from both our homes. He was waiting when I arrived, looking more serious than I had seen him in years. He stood when he saw me, awkwardly moving as if to hug me before thinking better of it and simply pulling out my chair. Thank you for coming, he began formally. Of course, I replied, studying his face. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he continued after ordering our coffees. About the wedding. About how you were treated. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I owe you an apology. A real one. I stayed silent, waiting. I knew about the seating arrangement, he admitted, not meeting my eyes. Stephanie said it was because we ran out of room at the family tables and I didn't question it. I should have, but I didn't. Why not? I asked quietly. He sighed heavily. Because it was easier not to. Because every time I tried to include you more in the wedding, it caused fights with Stephanie. Because I was afraid of ruining things with her. So you chose to hurt me instead. He flinched. Yes. And I've been making that choice for months, haven't I? Skipping our dinners. Not standing up for you when Stephanie made comments. Excluding you from planning. He finally looked up at me. I read your email a dozen times. Every word of it was true. And the help comment at the reception? His face flushed with shame. There's no excuse. None. I was shocked when she said it, but I was also a coward. I should have defended you immediately, made it clear that was unacceptable. Instead, I only reacted when I realized you were canceling the contract. Which tells me what your priorities were, I said gently. Yes. He swallowed hard. Money, status, my career. Not the woman who raised me, who has always been there for me. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing. I lost my job, he said finally. The CEO was furious about the contract, convinced I had manipulated the situation. Stephanie was furious too at both of us. We've been fighting constantly. I'm sorry about your job, I said sincerely. That wasn't my intention. I know. And honestly, it's been a wake-up call. He leaned forward. Mom, the things I've discovered about Stephanie since the wedding. It's like I'm seeing her clearly for the first time. What do you mean? She's obsessed with status, with appearances. The day after the wedding, she was already talking about how we could leverage the connection to your company, what circles we could move in because of your money. He shook his head. When the contract fell through, she was livid, not because of how she had treated you, but because she'd lost access to what you represented. I wasn't surprised, but I took no pleasure in his disillusionment. These realizations must be painful for you. They are. But necessary. He reached across the table tentatively, his hand stopping short of touching mine. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. What I did, what I allowed to happen was inexcusable. But I need you to know I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I studied my son's face, seeing genuine remorse there for the first time. What happens now? I don't know, he admitted. My marriage is in trouble. My career is in shambles. But I know that rebuilding my relationship with you is more important than either of those things. And if Stephanie doesn't change, if she continues to disrespect me, he straightened his shoulders, then I'll have a difficult choice to make. But I won't allow anyone to treat you that way again. Not even my wife. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it was a start. I didn't fully trust his words yet. They would need to be backed by consistent actions. But I could see the son I raised beginning to re-emerge from whatever spell Stephanie had cast over him. 6 months later, Adam showed up at my door alone, a small suitcase in hand. Can I stay here for a while? He asked, his voice rough. Stephanie and I are separating. I welcomed him home without questions, though the story emerged gradually over the following weeks. Without the prospect of wealth and connections through me, Stephanie's true nature had become increasingly apparent. Her spending habits, her criticism, her constant social climbing had created a toxic environment that eventually became unbearable. I kept thinking about what you said. Adam told me one evening as we sat in the library. About choices having consequences. About respect. I realized I didn't respect myself anymore. Letting her dictate my life, my relationships. Especially my relationship with you. As for me, the months after the wedding had been a time of painful growth. Diana had convinced me to join her volunteer work mentoring female entrepreneurs at the community college, something I had always been too busy for previously. There I found purpose in sharing my experiences with young women just starting their journeys. I also reconnected with old friends I had neglected during the years of focusing primarily on Adam and work. I traveled to places Robert and I had always planned to visit together. I learned to find joy in my own company again. Adam found a new position at a smaller firm, starting over with humility, and a new perspective on what truly mattered. Our relationship slowly healed as he consistently demonstrated through actions, not just words, that he had learned from his mistakes. 1 year after the disastrous wedding, we sat together in the garden Robert had loved, sharing a bottle of wine and memories. You know what I've learned through all this? I said, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. That self-respect isn't selfish. That unconditional love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to hold them accountable.
אדם נוטה טוב.
And I've learned that choices reveal character. That day in the reception when you made that call, you weren't being vindictive. You were being true to yourself, refusing to compromise your dignity. It was a lesson I needed to learn. The road ahead would still have its challenges. Adam was navigating his divorce. I was learning to trust his commitment to our relationship again. But we were moving forward with a new understanding and appreciation for what family truly means. Not blind loyalty but mutual respect, honesty, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. In the end, that phone call did change everything, not just for Adam and Stephanie but for me as well. It was the moment I reclaimed my worth, refused to be diminished, and in doing so, ultimately helped my son find his way back to the values that really matter. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this: never allow anyone to treat you as less than you are, even those you love most. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for healthy relationships. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to maintain your self-respect? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is an act of courage, not cruelty. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you demand to be treated.